Audio test for the meeting stream. And if the interpretation team could please do another sound check on the English channel, just a 10 count, that'd be appreciated.
Sound check from the interpretation 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3,
1,
2,
2,
1.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Apologies, interpretation team. Could you please do another 10 count on the English channel? I just need to double check something on my end, but I did hear it on YouTube, so it should be fine.
Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Thank you very much. And on the French channel, just a 10 count. Thank you very much, interpretation team.
Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in a minute. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting today of Thursday, August 20th for the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. I'll ask the committee coordinator to call the roll, please.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Lulaw.
Good morning.
Councillor Skalsky.
Here.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Present.
Chair Brown.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have quorum.
Thank you very much, Coordinator. Just a note that reports requiring council consideration will be presented to council on Wednesday, August 26th, 2026 in the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee report numbered 38. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, the one and only item that we have on the agenda today is the Rural Summit update. And this is coming from the last update we had earlier in the spring. And I'd like to acknowledge that the city manager has joined us here today. Madam City Manager, thank you very much for coming, along with the vast majority of the senior leadership team, whether they're here in person or online. And we appreciate the turnout today. I think it shows not only members of this committee that we have the support of city staff in moving these different recommendations forward, but that rural residents are well served by city staff and that our concerns are taken seriously. So thank you very much for attending today. We're going to start with a presentation by Laurel McCrate. Laurel, always great to see you at the microphone. Following that, I know the vice chair has one motion that he will read in, and then we will go to public delegations. So Laurel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, members of committee, and members of the public. My name is Laurel McCrate, and I am here from the Rural Affairs Office to provide you a further update on the Rural Summit. Next slide, please. Just a quick recap. We're here because there was a summit that took place in November of 2024. And in February of this year, the chair provided an update on the mayor's 10 commitments. Further to that, I was before you at the end of June with a verbal update on actions that have been completed by the city since the summit. And I presented to you the 6 themes that we were organizing our update on and further the report that is before you today. The 6 themes can be seen in the pie chart on the right. The way I structured the presentation and the report is we've broken down the themes into 3 sections. So what we've heard from residents at the summit, the actions that we have taken since the summit, and actions that are currently underway for the remainder of this year and into 2027. Next slide, please. First theme being infrastructure growth in the environment. Ditch renewal and maintenance. So we'll start with actions taken and then move to actions underway. Some of the actions taken you'll see throughout the presentation were previously presented, so I'll try not to dwell on them too much, but a few more have been added. So a major priority is improving rural infrastructure. Staff have made strides on all ditch and priorities stemming from the 2024 summit. Starting in 2027, rural residents, with the exception of those in the villages of Manotick, Richmond, and Carp, will no longer pay a stormwater fee. Instead, there will be a new lower rural ditch maintenance levy designed to increase the funding available for maintaining rural ditches. Next slide, please. This chart was before you previously, so it highlights completed projects since 2023 to present day. It highlights that many projects have taken place across all 5 wards, including upgrades to roads, culverts, and water and sewer systems. Next slide, please. Actions underway for ditching. Rural drainage maintenance capacity is being strengthened through enhanced brushing, cleanup, and mulching activities, supported by additional staffing and expanded contracted services. These improvements are intended to maintain effective drainage infrastructure and ensure timely upkeep across rural areas. Next slide, please. For road resurfacing and upgrades, the city continues to invest significantly in rural infrastructure with major funding directed towards road resurfacing, reconstruction, and upgrades. Recent work includes resurfacing of rural roads and targeted capital investments that support long-term asset performance and improve transportation conditions across rural communities. Next slide, please. Rural road renewal work planned for 2026 includes resurfacing and upgrades to gravel roads alongside ongoing updates to the city's asset management plan and a review of the infrastructure prioritization framework. Together, these efforts support long-term asset planning and ensure road renewal investments remain aligned with rural needs and system performance. Next slide, please. For growth management, the ability of rural residents to access the housing, services, and amenities they need in villages is associated with the ongoing growth of housing supply sustaining services in these villages. Rural village zoning was reviewed as part of the new zoning bylaw, including updated parking requirements. While citywide changes removed minimum parking standards for non-residential uses, rural areas require 1 parking space per dwelling unit to reflect local conditions and needs. Next slide, please. Staff have now started a detailed review of the potential growth within the rural area's smaller and mid-sized villages, recognizing that smaller villages should be considered separate from the larger ones. Staff will review existing secondary plans once further direction is provided from the province. Depending on the guidance received, the city will assess whether existing secondary plans are constraining potential development and will consider the extent to which current secondary plans support broader objectives related to economic development and housing. Environment. The city has strengthened rural land stewardship and wildlife management through expanded conservation land acquisition, increased restoration activities, and new governance oversight under ARAC. These efforts are complemented by the approval of the wildlife strategy and the establishment of a dedicated wildlife resource coordinator supporting long-term environmental protection and improved wildlife management across rural areas. Next slide, please. Rural environmental and infrastructure resilience work continues to advance through updated forest and wildland fire risk mapping, ongoing reforestation and riparian improvements, planning for enhanced public access and restoration activities on key natural sites. Coordinated drainage assessments to both short-term and long-term flooding challenges along the Bear Brook are currently underway. These efforts will support sustainable land management, improved emergency planning, and better protection of rural properties and agricultural lands. Next slide. The next theme is recreation, cultural, and facility services. And first I'll speak on parks and the actions taken. Rural parks will continue to play a unique and strategic role in delivering inclusive, accessible, and community-focused recreation opportunities for residents of all ages and abilities. Through the Cash in Lieu of Parkland program, life cycle renewal planning, and park revitalization projects, the city continues to invest in upgrading existing parks by replacing aging amenities, improving accessibility, and introducing new features that better support current patterns of use. A number of parks have been modernized, with additional parks introduced in the rural area to meet the recreational needs of residents. Rural parks play a unique and strategic role in delivering inclusive, accessible, and community-focused recreation opportunities for residents of all ages. Through the Parks and Recreation Facilities Master Plan, recreation, cultural, and facility services will advance progress towards rural service targets, ensuring equitable provision of parkland and amenities across rural areas. Next slide, please. Cultural initiatives in rural Ottawa saw strong momentum over the past few years. The city's cultural funding programs supported rural organizations, strengthening local arts, heritage, and community programming. Rural engagement also informed the development of Ottawa's next municipal culture plan through six consultation events across rural wards. Major cultural activities such as Doors Open 2026 and expanded rural summer camp programs demonstrated significant growth and increased participation. Next slide. Continued efforts to enhance cultural infrastructure and expand opportunities in rural areas will help improve access, support community identity, and recognize the unique contributions rural communities make to Ottawa's broader cultural landscape. Efforts include a report to committee and council in 2027 on the next municipal culture plan and a review and inventory of the approximately 200 city-owned road allowances that provide water access predominantly along the Ottawa and Rideau rivers, which was last completed in 2006. Next slide. Community facilities received upgrades and expansions that help maintain safe, functional, and welcoming spaces for community use. Emergency preparedness improvements have been advanced across the rural facility network through installation of transfer switches at community centers, fire stations, and municipal garages. Emergency reception and lodging sites, including the Manotick Arena and Constance and Buckham's Bay Community Center, now have generators installed and are operational. Next slide. Several rural community and corporate facilities are also undergoing improvements, upgrades, or evaluations to support long-term service delivery and strengthen local recreation, culture, and emergency response capacity. Work includes renovations, expansions, site restorations, and infrastructure upgrades across multiple rural locations, with additional projects being assessed for future development. Next slide. The third theme, economic development. Next slide. Since Council approved the Economic Development Rural Plan in May 2026, significant progress has been made, advancing several early priorities focused on strengthening support for rural businesses and improving access to economic development services. The Rural Community Building Grant Program continues funding eligible rural groups, strengthening local community initiatives. In addition, the province's new revised definition of rural under the Rural Ontario Development Program now includes most of rural Ottawa, an outcome achieved through sustained advocacy by city officials, expanding eligibility for future provincial support. Next slide. Several additional initiatives identified in the plan are currently underway, with implementation scheduled to begin this fall, including establishing a rural business advisory group and hosting additional rural business liaison showcases. A successful application to the Rural Ontario Development Program will result in new public realm plans for Metcalfe and Carp. Next slide, and moving on to social services. Service delivery for rural residents has been strengthened through an adapted employment and social services model that improves accessibility, availability, and ease of navigation. Additional supports are provided through contracted agencies delivering light housekeeping services and businesses supplying essential household items and basic repairs to eligible residents, ensuring consistent access to core services across multiple rural communities. Next slide. Employment and Social Services will also pilot a Rural Ontario Works caseload in rural East Ottawa in Q3 later this year, which will have a dedicated caseworker focused on the needs of this population and meeting with residents in their own communities. Lessons learned from this pilot will help inform best practices and potential expansion to other rural areas of the city. Next slide. Seniors. The 2025 Older Adult Plan incorporates rural perspectives by recognizing the unique needs of older adults living in rural communities and integrating insights from the Rural Summit consultations. The city is supportive to expand supports for rural seniors, including assistance for new affordable housing projects and strengthening access to primary care through the city's approved primary care provider recruitment and retention strategy. Next slide. As the Older Adult Plan moves into action, planning and implementation, rural considerations remain a key focus to help reduce barriers and enhance quality of life for older adults living in rural Ottawa. The plan will be released in Q4 of 2026, and Community and Social Services will report back to Council with a midterm progress report in 2028. Key rural health and housing initiatives are also advancing, including guidance for the Manotick Seniors Affordable Housing Project through development and construction and implementation of the city's physician recruitment and retention strategy, and also the preparation of a request for proposals for a new health hub. Together, these actions reinforce rural housing options and expand access to health services. Next slide, please. Transportation, and I'll talk about now paved shoulder and sidewalks. Between 2023 and 2025, significant progress was made strengthening rural transportation infrastructure, including the addition of just over 40 kilometers of paved shoulders on rural roadways. This work aligns with the city's broader direction under the Transportation Master Plan, which includes rural-specific requirements designed to improve safety, connectivity, and long-term transportation planning. Next slide. The resurfacing and paved shoulder program is the most sizable and wide-ranging impact the city has on active transportation in rural areas, especially outside of the villages. Rural transportation improvements planned for 2026 include new and renewed paved shoulders, design work to strengthen pedestrian connectivity on main streets, and continued requirements for active transportation facilities in new village developments. Together, these efforts support safer travel, improved mobility, and long-term planning. Next slide, please. In 2025, the city completed a comprehensive review of its traffic signal and always stop warrant process to ensure they function effectively in rural context. The review confirmed alignment with provincial standards and introduced enhancements such as rural speed studies and longer traffic count periods to improve assessment accuracy. Updated criteria for rural collector intersections was also approved, lowering the thresholds required to justify always stop controls. Collectively, these updates strengthen the city's rural traffic control approach, ensuring decisions remain consistent, data-driven, and responsive to rural operating conditions. Next. Rural transportation safety and connectivity continue to advance through new traffic control projects, targeted investments under the Road Safety Action Plan, and ongoing design work for future intersection modifications. Targeted improvements include shoulder work, safety edges, and treatment for skewed intersections. These combined efforts strengthen rural road safety, improve intersection functionality, and again, support long-term transportation planning. Moving on to transit, recent transit improvements have strengthened rural connectivity by expanding access to rapid transit, providing dedicated weekly travel options into urban areas, and enhancing commuter links through rural park and ride facilities. These initiatives also improve mobility for rural residents and support convenient access for travel across the city. Next slide. The city is also assessing ways to enhance rural mobility by exploring partnerships with private and nonprofit transportation providers and reviewing best practices across Canada. Staff are also evaluating where on-demand transit could be introduced, particularly in areas where limited or time-specific service to improve flexibility and access for rural residents. Next slide. And our last theme, rural emergency preparedness and first response. Next slide. The city remains committed to strengthening emergency response capacity, enhancing community resilience, and ensuring services evolve to meet the needs of rural residents. Emergency preparedness and response capacity in rural Ottawa has been reinforced through new alerting tools, major paramedic service enhancement, updated staffing models, climate readiness initiatives, and expanded community-level preparedness programs. These efforts improve coordination, response times, resilience to extreme weather, and ongoing monitoring of environmental conditions. Next slide. As for actions underway, emergency management and public safety work in rural Ottawa continues to progress through planning for future fire service expansions, ongoing monitoring of paramedic response performance, climate risk assessments of critical rural infrastructure, and a comprehensive wildland fire risk review. These initiatives solidify rural resilience, improve service delivery, and support proactive risk mitigation across growing rural communities. Next slide. So moving forward, our work will continue through strong collaboration and clear accountability. The Rural Affairs Office will maintain close coordination with all city departments and councillors to ensure rural priorities remain integrated across all areas of the city's work. Each year, we will report back to ARAC to demonstrate progress to ensure that rural initiatives stay on track and aligned with council direction. Looking ahead, planning will begin for the next Rural Summit to take place in early 2028. The next summit will be an important opportunity to revisit and set priorities and gather new input. The continued collaboration and expert management and commitment to accountability will keep rural communities well supported as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Laurel. Well done. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time and working with your colleagues across the city to put this presentation together. My understanding, it's probably one of the first presentations in the city's history that took so many folks to put together because of how broad it was. So we certainly appreciate the work that you've done. Vice Chair, I'll have you read in your motion for this report, and then we'll go to public delegations. And I believe Mr. Holmes, you're up after the Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Whereas the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee directed staff to report on actions completed, actions underway, actions remaining outstanding, recommendations for future committee consideration and implementation timelines arising from the 2024 Rural Summit. And whereas the report proposes annual reporting to the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee with an interim report in Q1 2027. And whereas biannual reporting would provide committee with more timely oversight of implementation, emerging challenges, funding requirements, and actions requiring council direction. And whereas consolidated action tracker is necessary for committee and the public to assess implementation progress, outstanding priorities, funding requirements, and measurable results. Therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to provide the first interim Rural Summit implementation update to the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee in Q1 2027 as already proposed, to follow with an update in Q2 and an update in Q4 2027 with biannual updates thereafter. And be it further resolved that staff be directed to include as part of the Q1 2027 Rural Summit Progress Report, a comprehensive action tracker identifying at minimum the most common concerns, up to 5 within each of the 6 themes identified within the report, the corresponding action and intended deliverable that addresses these main concerns, whether the action is complete, underway, outstanding, or not proceeding, the responsible department or service area, the anticipated implementation timeline and target completion date, the funding status and any potential future budget requirement, any required committee or council decision, and measurable outcomes or performance indicators that will be used to assess results. And be it further resolved that each biannual update include the updated Rural Summit Action Tracker, progress and deliverables completed during the reporting period, changes to timelines or implementation status, barriers, risks, or delays affecting implementation, priorities and anticipated deliverables for the next reporting period. And be it further resolved that in addition to the biannual report rising to committee, that the Rural Affairs Office organize briefings for individual councillors regarding works in their specific wards every 2 months to share any updates that arise from city staff meetings with the individual responsible department for the tasks identified in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Mr. Holmes, well, I'll turn the floor over to you, and I want to recognize that you're one of the 10 Rural Summit champions that got us to today. So I really appreciate you being here today and all of the work that you've done, not only this term of council, but over the last several. And I think likely going forward, you're going to continue to play a pretty active role, not only with the Rural Summit, but specifically with rural transit. So I'll turn the floor over to you, but thank you very much for everything that you've done to help us get to where we are today, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, back one. There we go. In my presentation today, will combine comments both on the Rural Summit in general, and then I'll specifically focus on rural transit challenges and solutions. I'm here representing both the Rural Transportation Solutions for Ottawa and speaking also as a member of the former Rural Summit process working with Ward 5. Next slide, please. So throughout the Rural Summit process, councillors regularly emphasize the need to communicate progress to our residents. This requires details like what action was recommended, what's the priority, what are the deliverables, and what are the timelines. The Rural Summit report we hear today is still weak in many important areas in the way it presents and represents the recommendations that arose during the Rural Summit itself. Next slide, please. Prioritization of recommendations will be extremely important. With more than 100 issues that were discussed and actions recommended during the Rural Summit itself and the workshops, that's far too many to try to simultaneously manage, and they need to be prioritized. Prioritization is generally lacking in this report. And rural transit is clearly one of the high priorities, as emphasized both during the workshops and in the summit itself. Next slide, please. Looking at the actions that were identified as being currently underway in the area of public transit, and we see the three bullets that were in the last report. And wording in those reports, such as is reviewing, does not help either councillors or residents track the progress. The items are far too open-ended and do not include target dates. Next slide, please. The Rural Summit process certainly was not done in isolation and has to relate to the major plans that are underway by the city. Looking specifically at the Transportation Master Plan, say before the start of Rural Summit 2024, the Transportation Plan gave that guidance in 2023. The Rural Summit report, the recommendations and the follow-up should build on this guidance by presenting more specific action items and their progress. Next slide. Getting even more specific, looking at the Transportation Master Plan, Action 8-2C listed 4 specific items, one of which was to conduct the engagement with the public to help define the expectations, and one later on is specifically the conduct of a pilot in the rural areas. Those were the actions that were approved as part of the TMP well before the Rural Summit started. Here, at least, we have some deliverables. The Rural Summit report needs to build on those steps and to establish some timelines. Next slide. Now, looking at the more shorter term plans, I'm reminded of the 5-year roadmap developed by OC Transpo. While the long-term plan, Transportation Master Plan, gave us really the framework for the long term, projects like that OC Transpo 5-year plan should have been dealing with some of the nearer term challenges in the rural area. Note that that plan, however, has not a single mention of the word rural. Next slide, please. Some of the work that we've been doing in the area of rural transportation. We've conducted a number of surveys over the years. Carleton University has helped us with some of those surveys and recently have completed what they refer to as a travel behavior model to better predict the interest in public transit in the rural area. And specifically looking at last year's budget, 10 minibuses were approved, specifically with mention of the need to conduct pilots and trials. So over the past 4 years, we've been conducting the research and preparing the way for the conduct of a rural transit pilot. Now is the time to put into action the recommendation of the TMP that were made more than 3 years ago. Next slide, please. These two specific items and details we had hoped would appear in the Rural Summit Action Plan and any follow-up and update. But the ideas still appear only as generalities in these reports. We recommend that the Rural Summit report include these very specific recommendations. They include both the conduct of the rural engagement in Q2 2027 and commencing trials in Q3 of 2007. That concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Ken. We'll go to Councillor Skalsky first. All right, Vice Chair.
All right. Thank you very much for your work on the Rural Summit, Mr. Holmes, and just to continue on what Chair Brown was saying, just last week, Mr. Holmes received a Ottawa 200 coin from the mayor for his dedication and all the work that he does in the community. So never miss an opportunity to thank you, Ken, for everything that you do. You heard me read my motion into the record. I know that you have concerns about, details and following the progress and where things are at. Should my motion pass, that contains biannual updates here, regular updates every 2 months to councillors on things happening in their ward, and a table where we can track priorities, where they're at, what needs to happen, where the funding status is at. Would that help ease some of your concerns about the details in this report?
It would help, but I think we still have a fundamental problem with the starting point. What we're receiving now are updates on actions that are taking place. I've yet to see a good solid report on the results of the Rural Summit itself. I talk about the need to prioritize. I don't think it's the responsibility of staff to prioritize. It's the responsibility of the rural councillors to take the results from the workshops and the summit itself and try to distill from that list of 100 items which are the highest priorities. That step hasn't been done, not to my awareness. So we're getting updates on something that doesn't really exist and needs to exist. And I hope one of the lessons that we've learned from Rural Summit 2024, which we can apply to 2028, is the importance of summarizing the results of the workshop and the summit itself as an action document, basically from rural councillors, saying, here's what we've heard, here are the major items, and here are the priorities that we recommend.
Yep, well, agreed, and I think we can all agree that after a 16-year absence in terms of having this exercise, that there are lessons learned after the first summit in such a long time, and I hope that we can all take that away from this process and bring that into the next summit, and certainly I believe that these updates and that tracker will help with what you're concerned about in terms of making sure we actually capture what was said and are following through on progress and or letting people know the lack of progress as well, because I think that's important as well. If things stall, we need to understand why and be able to explain that. So thank you very much for your feedback on that. I wanted to ask you one question on the transportation side of things, because you spend a lot of time on that important project as well, and finding transportation solutions in rural Ottawa that don't necessarily lead to large increases in a levy on a tax bill, I think is the appetite in rural Ottawa. And we've been talking for a while about different solutions and potentially a pilot project in a rural village. Do you see value? I think you've mentioned multiple times a single location for a pilot. Do you see any value in having a village from multiple wards, let's say Carp and Osgood, or Constance Bay and Greeley, or something like that? Is there room in your idea for a pilot that would look at the challenges in different areas of the city in rural Ottawa?
Well, certainly the challenges and indeed the solution is different in different wards and in different villages. I mean, we're all generally aware of that, and we also see it in the results of the several surveys that either RTS or Carleton University has done. We do, however, recognize the limitations of the city's resources when it comes to doing a pilot, and it might be advisable to conduct the first pilot focusing on one particular and somewhat representative village, and build on the lessons learned from there and try to apply pilots in a variety of villages. The variety including the size of the village and also including the possibility of connection between that village and the city's either OC Transpo system or the LRT system. The connections are very different, and the solutions, indeed the interest, is very different. In terms of degree of interest in a rural transportation solution, it varies across the city. Ward 5 is a little bit different in that Ward 5 has never been part of the rural transit area that includes any public transit. So there's no public transit in OC in Ward 5. So their understanding of the contribution to the solution is different than it might be, for example, in Ward 21. But in general terms, the surveys that the RTS has conducted have been showing results as high as about 45%. The population saying that they would likely or very likely use a rural transportation solution. We had thought those results were somewhat optimistic because they weren't random surveys, and we knew that we were getting somewhat of a biased response because the people that were talking to us were the ones that were interested in a rural transportation solution. Very pleasantly surprising, I just received yesterday the results from the latest project that Carleton University is doing, which is much more a random survey and a different type of survey. So rather than an advocacy group type survey that we've been doing where we ask people, are you interested? Here's what we think the pros and cons are. The survey that Carleton University did is what they referred to as a prescribed solution. So instead of asking people, would you like it? They look at a particular occasion, like a major event happening downtown, out in Lansdowne, or a hockey game, and they're asked, have you been to that sort of event in the last year? So we know the nature of the population, and then they were presented with some options, and the options varied by village, depending on the possibility of connecting to an OC Transpo system. And they were asked basically to consider how the cost of transportation cost them, the convenience, the time, the disruption, the reliability, those sorts of factors were built into the survey. And very surprisingly, 38% of some 410 respondents have said they would be very interested. They would likely use a public transportation system to go to the sorts of events that they were being surveyed over. So that's a long way to answer your question, sorry.
And one final question, Chair, if you don't mind. I thought I had asked my last one, but it just sparked a thought. Has there been any efforts made? Because I know, and I'm sure the situation is similar at other rural high schools that don't have access to public transportation, but the first inclination that I got way back in 2022 about the desire for transportation is certainly in my ward came from the high school. And the fact that the buses that do travel to North Canada after school are packed and people can't get on them because they need to get into town for work or sports or what have you. So has there been any efforts made or any mechanisms to capture that level, like that population as well?
Yeah.
As I get the sense that they're not the ones responding to the survey that you put out, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, we certainly included the under 18 age group in previous surveys. Difficult to break into that audience. We would like to be able to contact the youth in particular through the school system, but the school organizations have a fairly black and white rule that you're not allowed to enter the school to do any advocacy work. But one of the members of the team is also very involved with looking at youth challenges, and specifically in the rural area. And they did a major survey on youth mental health. And they found that I think the number 2 identified obstacle by the youth as to how they needed the situation to improve was transportation. So they need it in order to develop and maintain good mental health. They also need it to maintain a life, an opportunity to participate in recreation and social activities, and an opportunity to earn some money in a part-time job. So the youth are a significant challenge.
I have no more questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Holmes, for coming out today. It's important that we hear from you. My one question for you, though, and I want to make sure that I'll acknowledge Jerry, a great colleague of yours sitting behind you today. When we're looking at a rural transit pilot in rural Ottawa, I don't think any of our 26 villages are the same. Many have different needs and concerns from those residents. Do you believe there is the capacity from some of our private sector partners to offer a scaled pilot dependent on the village that we're looking to serve? So I know Richmond, which is the fastest growing village in rural Ottawa, might need something different than Carlsbad Springs or Greeley. Do you think there's an opportunity to scale a pilot for the particulars of that particular village?
Not exactly sure what your question is. Are you asking whether private industry has the deep pockets to be able to afford the number of buses to conduct a trial, or are they interested? Because certainly they're interested. I mean, the RTS has made it a point throughout to not try to define how the solution will be delivered. With the help of Carleton University, I think we're very convinced that the solution lies in an on-demand system, and to be reasonable and affordable. We're not looking at a system that duplicates what OC Transpo does. So we're looking for an on-demand system that will deliver passengers to an existing transportation node. It would take the better part of 5 minibuses to support a trial in any of the villages. So I guess the question to Jerry is, can he afford to buy 5 minibuses to go out and do a trial for the city? To me, the answer would be no. I mean, the city has identified as part of its transportation plan the need to conduct a trial, the need to conduct a pilot. The city is quite capable of doing it in Blackburn Hamlet. Why can't they do it in Manotick? Why can't they do it in Greeley? Why can't they do it in Carp? I don't think we need to dump it on private industry to conduct the city's trial. City should be doing it.
No, thank you very much. And I think we're going to see that come back, and there's an opportunity for us to pose questions to staff. And I'm sure a question will go towards Mr. Scrimger, who's here in the audience today. But I thank you for your delegation. I think there's great capacity to continue to improve. After all, in the last 20 or so years, I can't recall a time where rural Ottawa was one vote away from its full dream sequence when it comes toward rural transit and different options. That review is ongoing, and I know we're going to see the results of that. But again, we'll pose a few questions to Mr. Scrimger. I don't think rural Ottawa has ever been in such a good position to move forward with a solution that can change and adapt to our needs today. And that's something that I'm going to be looking forward to seeing in the next term of council. But thank you very much for coming out and delegating today.
And we do need to remind ourselves and remind staff that the last time the city conducted a comprehensive study of rural transportation was in 2002. Since that time, less than 50% of the recommendations that were made have been executed, and the solutions that were identified in that study very much focused on the peak transit demand, and much of that was being provided by rural partnership routes, something like 20 partnership routes, of which now 3 are in existence.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. I'll go to questions to staff, and Councillor Skalski, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Chair. I do just want to share a couple of comments and then a few questions to staff. So in my view, the Rural Summit was really a pressure. I keep referring to it as a pressure release valve. There was just so much pent up frustration, I think, in rural residents that this was a good opportunity to put it all out there, and people made really clear in my mind what expectations were not being met. And it covered the waterfront. So thank you, Laurel, for the putting it together and explaining where things are. I think it's tricky to bucket all of this, everything that we had heard at the Rural Summit and put it into, actionable pieces and trying to demonstrate what we've done so far. And clearly we have done work as a city, and I think that's great. Where I think it's less clear and it is how big the gap really is, and what's the end state and when we're going to get there. So I'm in full support of Councillor Kelly's motion to try to get us to that in a bit more structured way. The biggest comment I really have on this is that we really need to be a lot more frank about the state of affairs in rural Ottawa. For example, this report tells us that there's 86 kilometers of ditches that were done this year. But what's really missing is like how many total kilometers of ditch work hasn't been done in the last 10 years? What does 86 kilometers represent? And when will we get through the rest of it? And what's the plan to get there? And I think saying that we have a plan, we're working on a plan is really good. And it shows that we're taking seriously the concerns that are raised. But to be able to, the next step here is being actually able to talk to that data and really telling a story in a measurable way. I think having that information will complement the action plan that Councillor Kelly has described in his motion. So that's maybe for all staff that are here and listening, this being able to truly measure and be really honest about the situation, how big of a gap it is and what we're doing. And we won't be able to meaningfully have those conversations around budget either in the future if we don't have these numbers. So part of that story is this is the gap. And then this is how much, this is how many people it's going to take to get there. This is how much equipment it's going to take to get there. If there's a gap in that as well. So I think there's more, we're getting little bits and pieces across the report, across the presentations, but really pulling that together in a way that we can then speak to residents about it in an accountable way and have a good conversation about where we're going year to year, in my view is really important. And that's kind of what's missing in these reports to date. I did have a question that it's related to the funding programs. I'm not sure if Laurel's the right person to ask. So it's really the cultural funding programs. Oh, is someone available to answer?
Chair, there's staff from CSSD, I believe, online. I don't know what they look like. So specific, not to seniors or just,
Well, I guess just more generally about the criteria that we're using.
okay. Are there staff in the,
Is there anyone to be able to answer?
Yeah.
So maybe I'll pose the question and then see who's the best person to answer it.
mind.
So what I hear from rural residents, and the further out you go, I think there are certainly less services and there's service gaps. And so when we are funding organizations who indicate that they are serving rural residents, I just want to better understand. I can see in this report, it indicates $1.3 million in 2025 was given out to support different organizations operating in rural communities. And I just wanted to dig in a bit on the criteria that's, whether there is specific criteria or a scoring component that the city uses to give credit to projects delivered in rural communities.
I believe sorry, Chair, you're referring to maybe RCFS through that actually.
Okay.
Chair, and this might be me, at least for the cultural component. So yes, the report does outline funding to cultural groups across the community. In terms of rural, there are criteria, the same criteria apply for the program broadly. Excuse me, and largely based on the cultural merit of what is being proposed. So it is a cultural funding program that looks at, the performance, artistic merit of what's being proposed, the heritage merit of what is being proposed, and the agricultural fairs, for example, is an example where in the various communities across the city, we are funding the fair program, and there's specific criteria to that. All of that is contained in the cultural policy in terms of qualifications of who is eligible, in terms of nonprofit, that the service is locally based for the local population. And then we get into the more merit-based evaluation. All of the funding is jury assessed. And so the results really do reflect the competitive process of the applications and jurying of the funding that's being allocated.
Okay, that is helpful. I have, and maybe, so if we trace these dollars, I guess what I'm trying to get at is whether the result of this money is actually playing out in rural Ottawa.
It certainly is an enabler for a variety of cultural activities in rural Ottawa, both in supporting the creative aspects, the heritage recognition aspects. It includes the museums, for example. And we do assess each of the groups on an annual basis as part of the review of their grant application. Some of them are one-time project grants. Others are ongoing funding grants, the museums and the fairs being an example. And an assessment is done that the jury then sees in the following year to be able to assess things like impact, merit of the cultural activity, those kinds of things.
Are those reports made public, the results reports?
The funding allocations are made public. We don't, there are, in the cultural funding program, there are probably 400 to 500 groups. So we don't publish an assessment of each group. Generally, we will, if a member of the public or a counselor, we would summarize the jury findings on a group, and not necessarily the entire jury deliberation, for example.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay.
I have another question, but it's sort of in the same vein, but it's related to the older adults program. So I'm not sure if, it's, so I'll ask it and we'll see maybe who's the right person in the room. So when I'm speaking to seniors and they are in different rural villages, there may be seniors programs that are available, but it's not nearby. So it's offered to rural residents, but they have to drive 35 minutes to access these programs. And so my question is about when evaluating an application that claims to be serving rural residents, specifically for seniors, how is the geographic sort of nature of where those services are actually being delivered considered and assessed?
Good morning, Chair. Cynthia Pagé from CSSD here, community funding. I'm covering today for my director, Sarah Taylor. I can take the question. So the Older Adult Plan funding is under the community funding portfolio. The allocation process is currently underway, and the rural lens is applied not only for the older adult plan funding, but for all community funding allocation. When we look at the geographic distribution lens, we prioritize agencies that are located in rural ward. And we also look at agencies providing services in those wards.
One follow-up on that. Do we know, is there clarity on where there are gaps today? And where, so, evaluation criteria can also be used to incentivize expansion into other areas where there may not be programs. Is there enough information right now about where there are service gaps and how we could use our funding to actually expand services into areas where there currently may be limited service?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So we are aware of accessibility challenges in terms of residents, even if the services are offered, they're not always easily accessible to rural residents. When it comes to funding services that serve rural residents, community funding is bound by our policy statement and open call for proposals. So we need eligible community organizations located in rural agencies to apply for community funding opportunities. And I would say like the opportunity to expand community funding investment in the rural areas can be influenced by the number of eligible nonprofit organizations operating in those wards and also applying for the funding.
Does that mean that you're not getting a lot of applications for certain types of things? Yeah.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, I think that would be helpful for us to know if there are, you see very obvious gaps, you're putting opportunities out there for organizations to apply and we're not seizing the opportunity. Maybe we need to get it in the ear of organizations that we know are serving residents well and work with them a bit more closely to deliver to deliver more for rural Ottawa. So thank you. Thanks for the questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to say I completely agree with what Councillor Skalski said in terms of more data, more benchmarking. I think everybody knows I'm a bit of a data geek, but I think that would be really helpful going forward. So great comments. I wanted to start by saying I do think that this group of rural councillors, with the support of the mayor and of course with the engagement of residents who participated in the Rural Summit, have moved the needle for rural Ottawa more than we've seen since amalgamation. That needle isn't torqued all the way to where we want to see it, but it certainly has moved, which was the stated goal when we started all of this. And I think we will certainly take that momentum and build on it, hopefully over the next couple of years. But, I do think we have seen changes, material changes that we can see when we're, in our communities, whether that's more ditching happening. We were all sort of commenting that we've seen the machines and our staff out there doing ditching work that has been long overdue. But we also see it within the organization in terms of strengthened governance, but also just more attention and awareness to rural issues. I think within the city. So all of that's very positive. And I want to thank Laurel and all the staff that have been working with us to move these things forward. There is one thing I do want to just put on everyone's radar, though, and that is that just like how we don't want rural Ottawa to be lost in the shadow of urban Ottawa, I don't want the rural parts of the suburban rural split wards 1 and wards 19 to be forgotten. I appreciate that, investment will be proportional, but when I was listening to the presentation, there wasn't a lot highlighted for the East End rural Ottawa. And I think, it's important in future updates, perhaps in the reporting, to have a bit more detail to show where these investments are being made so that we don't sort of celebrate a win for rural Ottawa and sell it as something that's truly citywide when it's concentrated in a few areas. So that's something that I would like to see going forward. And again, to just recognize that for these rural suburban split wards, there are vibrant rural communities. There's of course the villages, but there's also a large mass of rural area, agricultural area that I wouldn't want to get lost. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Vice Chair Kelly.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have a few questions. Sorry, my battery saver just came on, which means this plug isn't working, which means my computer is about to die, which is not good.
If we had the Jeopardy music, I'd play it now. So please stand by.
Thank you very much, everyone. That would have been bad. I got a couple questions, then I have a spiel. I'll consult the clerk or the chair on when he wants me to do what, but I'll start with the questions. I guess my first one, and a few of these I've just pulled out quotes from the report and then have follow-up questions on it. So the first thing I'll start with is that going forward, the Rural Affairs Office will manage an annual coordinated work plan to deliver on tangible, funded, community-driven results with action items focused on rural outcomes and will be based upon the annual approved budget as recommended by the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee and approved by Council. So my question here, is it safe to assume that the work plan will have several aspects to it and an understanding of monthly or quarterly results of that work plan and what has been accomplished that will be discussed in meetings run by the Rural Affairs Office? I'm trying to understand what that looks like at a staff level. Is that you walking over to chat with someone? Are these scheduled meetings that happen regularly? And then how does that those challenges and those discussions that you're having at the staff level filter down or filter to us so that we can understand, is that happening in those briefings that we get every 2 months? Can you just expand a little bit on what that looks like?
Perhaps, Laura, do you want to just describe basically, and then I'll add to you?
Chair. So I meet with all of you once a month, and then with the rural leads that have all been designated since the summit and I came on board just over a year ago, we meet quarterly as well. But I think the motion that you have before us will kind of set the framework moving forward on what those meetings will look like. It'll provide not necessarily more structure, but kind of an agenda of how we are moving forward in addressing these items to be able to provide you a better breakdown and more data and more specifics that both Councillor Skalsky and Kitts were mentioning. And then you also mentioned in your motion meeting, I think is it biannually or every 2 months there's a lot of meetings with you guys as well. So I'm happy to take a look at what those look like to report back from when I meet with the rural leads and the issues that we're bringing forward, how those are delivered to you, like working that out in my head.
So if I might just add to that, I mean, I think in the work to get to this report, we don't want to change what's working in terms of the staff leads, the context that you already have in terms of elevating issues and getting responses. I think what we are trying to do is organize the work of the city around the priorities that we heard in the summit, and then create some rigor around how we, exactly as was mentioned by Councillor Skalski and Councillor Kitts, how do we measure the delta between where we need to be and where we are now, and put some senior level attention to that in preparing this report. We went to our senior leadership team. There's many of the senior leadership in the room here today. So I think it's about building the structures of rigor. I also think there's an opportunity as we start to bucket and better understand the pieces of work the city does that provide a service that is highly valued by rural residents. It also allows us an opening to rethink what is the ARAC budget and how do we better identify those pieces of work in terms of things that can be discussed at this table. So partly getting some structure around the Rural Affairs Office and how it coordinates everything across the departments will make it easier for us to have that conversation at budget. And I see it getting iteratively better year over year. And then that also will allow us to set the priorities that was mentioned by the delegate.
We often use the term art of the possible around here. I've noticed that's one of our favorite phrases, and I certainly like the sentiment of it. I think from the councillor perspective, so much of what we can't accomplish is based on, you know, the plans that we pass. They're very rigid. There's policies, and sometimes, you know, it's just not possible with the system in which we operate. And I think from the councillor perspective, we always want to know, well, what can we change to affect that and make it, you know, more adaptable to where we want to go. So hoping that those are the types of conversations that are had between staff and council moving forward in terms of that. I think my next question may be for you, Laurel, but I see GM Gonche is in the room, and this is about the ditching. We've heard a lot about that this term of council. Very happy with the progress that we've made. And there's a line in here that says these activities provide immediate improvements to water conveyance while also preparing ditches for more efficient and cost-effective maintenance in the future. That is on page 8 of the report. Do we know, you know, so what does that look like? What is more efficient and cost-effective future maintenance look like? What does that mean?
Good morning. So I think one of the piece that when we're looking at the ditching, I think the obvious piece is basically when we're essentially excavating to kind of clean the ditches themselves. One of the element that we're also integrating as part of this program is the brushing along some of the ditches. Some of the ditches have gotten overgrown over the years, which makes it even challenging to be able to do any effective cleaning. So that line there is to indicate that some of the work that we're doing, especially in terms of brushing, will make it more efficient in the future to be able to clean the same ditches.
Meaning the next time you go back, it's not nearly as labor intensive as it is this round, because you'll be back sooner, essentially.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gontier. And then either you or Ms. Rose would probably be best suited for this next question, if not Laurel. So there is on page 9, it says in response to a motion by Councillor Dudas, staff are evaluating the existing infrastructure prioritization framework to determine whether adjustments to the road renewal budget distribution across individual road classes are feasible. Obviously, this is something we've discussed a lot, is the difference between my list and yours when it comes to road resurfacing. So to me, that's what I'm hearing here. I think it's good, and I'm hoping you can confirm that what I'm hearing is right, is that in the future, there might be a different way where roads are prioritized or funding is distributed in terms of road classes, residential, main arterial roads, and how we prioritize everything. Is there a future where my list might match your list with a little more synergy?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. And yes, we are working actively on the motion as directed by Council through Councillor Dudas. And essentially what we are preparing is a menu of options and with risks and benefits associated with those options, so that if council would like to direct staff in a different direction, then it would be quite clear what risks we're accepting and what benefits we're accepting with that as well. And so that would be the intent of what we bring back as part of the 2028 asset management report.
I have no more questions, Chair. I do have a little bit of a spiel if you want me to get back on the board and let Councillor Luloff ask his question. Oh, yes, I do have another question. Thank you for the reminder. This one is for Mr. Scrimger. Going back to Mr. Holmes' delegation in terms of pilot projects, and he mentioned the one in Blackburn Hamlet. And so I guess my question to you is, why can't we do a rural pilot, or when can we do a rural pilot from an OC Transpo perspective? And where is the review of the Blackburn Hamlet pilot at? Will we get to see those results soon, what the challenges were, and all of that? So maybe you could just talk to us a little bit about that.
Maybe I can work backwards on that. The review of the Blackburn Hamlet pilot project was wrapped up over a year ago, and if you haven't seen it, we'll get you a copy if you'd like to connect with me offline. We have ordered, the city has ordered the 10 minibuses for starting some on-demand service across the city. The city has also just this summer finalized a contract with a company who will help us with both the analysis and the software to run on-demand service. We know the interest in having at least one of the on-demand zones being in the rural area, and so we're including the rural areas in the assessment of where the best areas would be. The best areas will likely be places that are ridership is not terribly low. Ridership or potential ridership is not terribly low, because then we'd have a minibus assigned to that zone that wouldn't be doing much work. Also not very high, because there's more efficient ways of moving large numbers of people. One of the questions will be how close that potential zone is to a major transfer point. So you can imagine that somewhere like Blackburn Hamlet, very, very close to a future O-train station at Montreal. Somewhere like, to pick an extreme, somewhere like, well, the extreme would be Marionville, Burritts Rapids being a very, very long way. Somewhere like Osgood being quite a long way. And if the bus did a trip there, it would be, close to an hour and a half till it's back ready to do another trip, which reduces the spontaneity for people. If we find that, so there's two possible paths here. One is that if we find that in the half dozen or so zones that we'll select to go ahead with, if we find that one of them is in the rural area, then we might bring a recommendation to the Transit Committee and Council to establish some funding for that test, because currently there is no funding established for any service increases in the rural area. Alternatively, if there were a direction from Council to make sure that one of the zones that we test is in the rural area, that direction would need to come along with a funding source. So these are possible ways. Right now we're doing the analysis, so I can't tell you yet whether what would be the best rural zone. Greeley is perhaps the closest, but Greeley is a particularly low density village. So we'll do the work, we'll see. And if there's direction from Council to guide us in that work, we'll take that direction.
I think you've just highlighted one of the main challenges with an amalgamated city of Ottawa is just the vastness of it. There are rural villages that are close to transit hubs, and then rural areas and villages that are an hour and a half away from a destination that would be able to be, beneficial to having that service there. So do you see multiple rural pilots happening simultaneously so that we can get a a good idea of the difference in need and challenges. It seems to me that would give us a better idea of what we're up against, rather than if we choose one village and it works really well, but that model can't be repeated somewhere else, then we may have lost a lot of time and made no progress.
Mr. Chair, certainly take the councillor's point that it would take time, but we're starting pretty slow here. The approval from council, and it, slow yet ambitious at the same time. The decision for council was to buy 10 of these minibuses. So if you figure that there's always going to be a couple of them in maintenance, some of the busier zones are going to take 2 buses rather than just 1. That's why I'm saying I'm thinking about half a dozen zones. We need to try it out in different types of places to learn how people in Ottawa will react to this opportunity. We need to try it in places that have high ridership enough to justify buses in rush hours, but not outside rush hours. We need to try it in areas that are just developing, new areas where there will ultimately be a lot of interest in transit, but initially the population is small. We might not have enough resources to commit too many of these buses to rural areas. However, having said that, if that comes with funding, presumably increased taxes in the rural areas to fund this kind of operation, then we'll develop a plan. We're certainly ready to follow whatever direction council gives us.
Thank you, Mr. Scrivener. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Luloff.
Thanks so much, Chair. I want to express my my support for the comments and questions of my 4 rural colleagues. I'll concentrate a little bit, I think, on what Councillor Kelly was just talking about. I think that we've got a major opportunity, especially in the East End, to ensure that we are building more rural connectivity when it comes to the launch of Stage 2 LRT. During the pandemic, many people decided to move outside of even our suburban areas, with the thought that perhaps the government would allow them to continue to work from home. We know that that's not the case now, and so we're left with in a position where housing prices are very high. People have changed sort of their living habits, and there's quite a few people living in our rural areas that are now needing to commute in, and we also have several other municipalities just outside of our borders that are also in the same position, where people may have lived closer to the city before, but are now sort of on the outskirts. And so I think that there is an opportunity to expand our rural transit offerings. I think that the East End is a good place to pilot that, as well as some of our south and west areas as well, but particularly in the East End, given our proximity to Rockland and the amount of people that commute in to the city from Cumberland Village and Navan, and knowing how close the terminus is at Trim to these rural villages, I think would make a lot of sense to make that investment, at least in the form of a pilot when it comes to feasibility. We can collect our data, as Councillor Kitts likes to do, and make the case for perhaps a continued investment. I don't think that it's a good idea to immediately say, okay, let's bring our rural villages into the transit levy for a pilot. I think that we should get the data, run a pilot, see what that looks like, and then consult to see if that should continue. As we consider this report, I want to highlight an important part of the rural spirit that we've spoken quite a bit about throughout this process. Many rural villages have long felt that they don't receive the same level of municipal support as suburban and urban wards. We heard that quite a bit throughout this process and throughout our discussions here at this table. And as a result, rural residents have stepped forward to create their own programs and maintain their own community spaces. You know, we heard from Ken, who's pushing for even some private delivery of transportation, and you know, we see this quite a bit in Cumberland and in the East End as well. These are delivered often through not-for-profit organizations such as our Lions Clubs, who do a really wonderful job, and community associations. Not to go in and mention all of them, but these are the two that I'll highlight today. In Cumberland, our community association has helped to build and maintain bridges on city property along the Wilsondale trails. We're really grateful for that work that they do on a volunteer basis. Maple Hall, which is operated by the Cumberland Lions Club, has become a vital gathering place and community hub for Cumberland Village. You know, the Lions were recently advised that Maple Hall requires upgrades to its fire safety equipment, and were given an order from the city, as well as significant work that they need to undertake to bring their kitchen up to code. You know, they're running lunches every day. These are serving seniors. This is providing a hub for seniors to come and meet and eat together. And you know, understanding that as we get older, our friends group gets smaller and more curated, having these opportunities to be able to interact with each other and get together and get out of the house and you know, continue to weave that fabric of our rural community is so important. You know, these improvements that they've been told they need to make are essential, but they also present a substantial financial burden for a volunteer-led, not-for-profit organization that are delivering services that perhaps the city cannot invest in. So these organizations like the Lions are providing these services, programs, and community spaces that residents depend on, and we otherwise cannot offer them. So I suppose my question is, what can the city do to provide practical and financial support to these vital rural not-for-profits, particularly when they face major capital repairs or new regulatory requirements? What can I tell them today that we can do to help them out? I don't know if there's program dollars or capital dollars or anything further than just the rural grant that we discuss here once a year. These organizations are not simply asking for help. They're already doing the work in our community, and supporting them means recognizing their contribution, protecting important community assets, and strengthening the rural spirit that keeps our villages thriving. You know, Maple Hall is where we hold budget consultations. Many of the people sitting around this table have been in there. Many staff have used this facility too. I think it's important that it's preserved, and I'm wondering what we can do to support our not-for-profits in the rural area.
Chair, this may be an instance where our community partnership major or minor capital program may be able to assist. I'm saying that without knowing who actually owns Maple Hall and what the nature of the work, but certainly if it is being used as a community facility for public assembly and providing community programs, then we'd be interested in talking to the group and identifying what the needs are and how we might be able to help, as we have in other instances where a nonprofit entity is providing community animation space for that is accessible to the public. So we'd be happy to look at that.
I really appreciate that, Dan. Thanks so much. And I also want to express my sincere thanks for the willingness of you and your team to always step up and look for solutions. I think that's really becoming of our city, and really appreciate that response. Thanks. Over to you, Chair. Oh, go ahead.
I may just add to that. The Rural Community Building Grant Program is one that this committee is familiar with, and I would draw the the Lions Club's attention to that program. It may not be enough to take it all the way, and it doesn't have the depth of funding that certainly the major capital projects through Parks and Recreation have, but we have supported a number of these local community halls and community associations in upgrading their facilities, and it might be something that we could speak to offline at any point.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Derek. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. seems a bit surreal that the first thing I did as councillor was move the motion to bring back the Rural Summit, and here we are, almost at the end of the term, still discussing it, which I think really reinforces and highlights some of the comments that we've heard today from my colleagues around the fact that, this hadn't happened for 16 years. And the fact that we are having the conversation is a big deal, and in and of itself was a big step forward for rural Ottawa to spend so much time talking about rural issues around the council table this term of council. When I brought back this initiative, the goal was never to simply have public meeting. The goal was to restore a meaningful forum where rural residents could speak directly about the services, policies, infrastructure, the things that really affect their lives in rural Ottawa. And more importantly, where that input would lead to action. And we've heard some thoughts on that today, and how to track that and ensure accountability on that as well. And rural Ottawa represents an absolutely enormous part of the city geographically, over 80%. But in a municipality such as Ottawa, it can easily be overshadowed by the pressures and priorities from urban and suburban communities. And the summit was about putting those issues squarely back on the city's agenda, and giving residents, businesses, farmers, community organizations, and everyone who came out a direct role in identifying those priorities and potential solutions. We had more than 250 residents who participated in the November 2024 Rural Summit, following months of consultation and the work of our amazing resident working group, who were just fantastic during this process, and we couldn't have done it without them. We heard about roads, we heard about ditches, transportation, emergency response, we heard about recreation, economic development, agriculture, and growth. But I think something that cuts across all of that, and the most important message, at least to me as part of this, is that the city, it needs to recognize, and I believe has through this process, that delivering a service in rural Ottawa is not the same as delivering it in urban or suburban Ottawa. I think today's report demonstrates that bringing the Rural Summit back has made a difference. We have doubled the ditch maintenance budget, expanded the city's capacity to do that work, and we're seeing that. We're hearing that today, that we are seeing that visually every single day in our ward. We have dedicated paramedic response units in Kinburn, Richmond, and Metcalfe. We have a rural economic development plan and an established dedicated rural business liaison. And perhaps, more importantly than that, we never make it through an Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee without mentioning Laurel McCrate as the newest member of the Rural Affairs Office, and strengthening that. And those are just a few of the things that we've talked about today that are actually tangible outcomes. And I think they are worth recognizing, and they are worth celebrating. And I want to thank staff, Laurel, not just you, but staff from across the organization, who have taken the feedback from the summit seriously and moved this forward in a meaningful way. We can see that the city is taking this seriously. Today we have, I would say, the bulk of our general managers and senior leadership. We have the city manager here today. The mayor has appeared at this committee to talk about the Rural Summit. But I think something that was also made very clear is that we are not finished. This is not the end of the process. There are major pieces of work still underway. Some will require decisions by the next council. Some will require future budget investments. And some of these issues that residents raise will take years rather than months to fully address. So for me, the next step of this process is about accountability. And residents should be able to see in a simple and transparent way what we said we would do, what has been completed, what is underway, what remains outstanding, who is responsible for it, and when they can reasonably expect a result. And that is why I believe we need a clear action tracker coming out of this work to identify all of that and give people a good idea of when they can see results. And I'm sure that I do have my colleagues' support on that motion. The report commits to a coordinated work plan through the Rural Affairs Office. But as this work continues, I want to make sure committee and council have sufficiently regular reporting and actually can track the progress. Because the next Rural Summit should not be starting from scratch. Residents should be able to walk into that summit and see, here is what you told us in 2024, here is what we've accomplished, and here is what remains outstanding, and now where do we go from here? Bringing back the Rural Summit was about rebuilding a stronger, more consistent relationship between rural residents and their municipal government. And I believe that the measure of success was never going to be whether we held a successful event in November 2024. The measure of success is whether rural residents can look around their communities in the years that come and see that something has changed. And I think today's report shows that that change has begun. And our job now is to make sure that it continues. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to everyone in this room who played a role in this process. And let's continue the great work that we've done over this course of the process and the term of council. Thank you.
Well said, Vice Chair, and thank you very much. And I think residents know that the work will never be done, and that's part of the role of being an elected official. You're a link in a chain, and our job is to make life better for our residents while we are here. And I think unquestionably, we've been able to do that through the Rural Summit. The leadership from Mayor Sutcliffe, Vice Chair Kelly, and members of this committee, both past and present, I think really showed up in this term of council. We've made significant progress. There have been many firsts that we've had. We've heard about ditching. We've heard about the water rate, about bringing on new staff to address the concerns that we hear from residents. Many of those details are in the presentation and the report. And I think there's lots that goes unsaid because we have taken action on just about every file in rural Ottawa in this term of council. And I know that work's going to continue. And I think residents know that they're better placed today than they were 4 years ago. And that again is a credit to the leadership that this committee and Mayor Sutcliffe have shown to rural Ottawa. And I'd also like to take another opportunity to thank the city manager and her staff, because it is a partnership between those of us on this side of the table and you on that side of the table. And we know you take our concerns seriously, and there hasn't been a time where I know my colleagues and I haven't reached out where the first thing you say is, how can I help? And so, City Manager, I would like to take the opportunity to recognize the efforts that you have put in yourself and your staff to make sure that we know that our concerns are being addressed properly and timely when we bring them to you. So thank you very much, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. There are many general managers in this room, and I'd like to take an opportunity to thank each of you individually as well. Again, the partnerships that we've been able to develop over these last 4 years have been tremendous. We know that we can reach out to you when we get a call from our residents, and we know that you're going to be responsive. And I think that's the hallmark of a very strong team, both on the political and the public servant side. So thank you very much for all of that. And I'll acknowledge Deputy Chief of Staff Light. He's here on behalf of the Mayor's office today. John, I think you are probably one of the best advocates for rural Ottawa in the Mayor's office, along with Mr. Byers. And we appreciate the work that you, Mr. Byers, and Mr. Gravel do, ensuring that rural residents are heard in the Mayor's office. And I think it's fair to say that rural Ottawa hasn't seen a mayor as often as we've seen Mayor Sutcliffe. And that hasn't gone unnoticed, and our residents are extremely grateful for that as well. So colleagues, before we move on, with the report, I'll ask if Vice Chair Kelly's motion is carried. Thank you very much. And the report recommendation reads that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council receive this report for information, including actions completed and underway to address principal themes and concerns identified during the 2024 Rural Summit, and to deliver the next Rural Summit as described in this report. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much. There are no in-camera items. However, I believe Councillor Skalski has a notice of motion that she'll read in.
I do, and thank you, colleagues. It's a long one for your patience as I read this one. Service level. So this is in regards to service levels for equipment used in rural operations. Whereas the City of Ottawa relies on specialized fleet equipment to undertake rural road maintenance, ditching, grading, drainage improvements, shoulder maintenance, and other seasonal infrastructure work. Whereas Ottawa's construction and rural maintenance season is constrained by weather, making the availability and reliability of specialized fleet equipment essential to delivering planned work programs and maintaining safe infrastructure. Whereas prolonged equipment downtime reduces productivity, delays scheduled maintenance, increases costs, and limits the city's ability to complete seasonal work within the available construction window. Whereas council has an interest in ensuring that fleet management practices maximize equipment availability and minimize operational disruptions during the active maintenance season. Therefore, be it resolved that staff undertake a comprehensive review of the reliability, availability, repair frequency, repair duration, and life cycle costs of specialized fleet used to support rural road and drainage maintenance operations. Be it further resolved that the review include an inventory of specialized fleet assets supporting seasonal rural operations, the number of repair events experienced by each asset over the previous 3 years, the total number of days each asset was unavailable due to repairs, preventative maintenance, warranty work, parts availability, or other causes, the repair, maintenance, and life cycle costs associated with each asset, identification of recurring mechanical failures, procurement delays, parts shortages, staffing constraints, vendor service delays, or administrative processes that contribute to extended equipment downtime. Recommendations to improve preventative maintenance practices, parts inventory, fleet replacement planning, procurement processes, and operational procedures to reduce equipment downtime. Be it further resolved that staff report on the feasibility of establishing a fleet availability performance standard for specialized seasonal equipment, including annual reporting to ARAC on equipment availability during the active maintenance season. Be it further resolved that the report examine the feasibility of establishing a target that critical seasonal fleet equipment be returned to operational service within 48 hours of being removed from service, except where major component failure or other exceptional circumstances make this impractical. And be it further resolved that the report identify any changes necessary to support the standard, together with contingency measures, including reserve fleet, rental equipment, contractor support, or equipment sharing, to minimize impacts when extended repairs cannot be avoided. Be it further resolved that staff develop a notification protocol requiring rural ward councillors to be advised whenever critical seasonal rural maintenance equipment is expected to remain out of service for more than 48 hours during the active maintenance season, and when there's no mitigation plan to ensure scheduled work will continue. Be it further resolved that staff report back with recommendations to establish ongoing fleet availability performance indicators, including but not limited to fleet availability rate for each category of specialized seasonal equipment, the average time to return equipment to service, total downtime days by fleet category, the number of equipment outages exceeding 48 hours, percentage of planned rural maintenance work delayed due to fleet unavailability, and annual repair and maintenance costs by fleet category and asset age. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skalski. That'll be debated at the next meeting of the Rural Affairs Committee. I don't believe there are any inquiries, so we'll stand adjourned, and our next meeting is Thursday, September 3rd, 2026. Thank you all for coming.